Welcome back to Hess World. I'm your host, Martin Hess. Delighted that I'm joined today by my guest, Carl Rigby. Carl is somebody who I first met when we were both in our 20s, which was a long time ago, when we were both young, thrusting sellers in IBM. I had my first management job, which was actually selling ATMs, cash machines, and Carl was looking after Bristol and West, and we were trying to sell them the first, I think, colour screen ATMs. And then we've been sort of business partners, friends for many years since, and we've invested in a number of early stage companies, some successfully, some unsuccessfully. So, and during that period, Carl took a little detour to be a guest of Her Majesty's Prison Service, which Carl is going to talk about as well. So, thank you for joining Hess World today, Carl. Tell us a little bit about, in your words, your journey through your career.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So I started life, I'm from up north, born and bred in Wigan, and I ended up going to university in Bath, which is where I now, which is now where I live, and I love living there. Post university, as you mentioned, I was at IBM, and I was there for 8.5 years. To be honest, even though I was, I suppose, immensely successful compared to others, I never felt I fitted in. I felt I wound people up with the way I went about things, which to me seemed the right way. I used to spend all my days out at clients. I had offices in my different clients. I was permanently asked to come back in and talk about the win we'd just had at Allied Dunbar or somewhere else, and to me, I didn't particularly enjoy that. So I got to the point where I really was quite frustrated with corporate life. I was just under 30 at the time. I had 2 offers from very large, respectable companies. Not sure they both exist now, SEMA and PA Consulting. And I basically met up with somebody that said, let's go into business together. And I turned both offers down and started on the journey of startups. Firstly, my own startups, and then latterly sort of investing in startups being run by other people. The first of the startups was a company called AIT, which we grew and grew and grew. Eventually, it was 600 people dotted around the world. We were CRM for financial services, and in 1997, we floated on the main London Stock Exchange. I had a very different route with my second software company, which was N4 Solutions, where within 4 years grew remarkably quickly, and we did a trade sale exit to Experian. And since both of those software companies, I set aside, I did what I think a lot of people do, set aside a certain amount of money, which I was prepared to lose because I had no experience of investing in startups. And I basically set about trying to make a return on that money.
And then you went latterly into investing in startup businesses, early stage businesses.
Yeah, and to give the audience a feel for what I've done, I've invested in 13 different companies over the years. Tended to go for what's not everybody's cup of tea. I went for real sort of startups like pre-revenue, pre-product in a lot of cases. Did 13 of them. I was always told if you could get a sort of 1 in 4, 1 in 5 to come good, you were doing well. So if I look back now, because where I'm at the moment, I've got two or three that are still to exit, but they're at the point where they're beyond the risk. So if I say I've invested in 13 companies, 7 of which will have come good, invested about 1.5 million in total, and I'll hope to return about 7.5 from that, and then I'm done after that.
Right. So let's go back. There's some great learnings there, I think, for the folks listening. Let's go back to AIT, because it's hard to imagine now what IBM was like back in those days. I always describe it as IBM was the sun and the whole industry was revolved around it. It dominated the industry. So to leave IBM, where everybody in IBM thought they were working for not just the best company in the industry, but the best company period in the world, to leave that and join a startup, that was an unusual move, actually. It's a lot more common these days, but it wasn't back in the 90s, was it?
No, it definitely wasn't. I think at the time, a couple of people close to me thought, you're completely barking mad. The reason I'd got those 2 offers was I'd seen the light, in the sense that the world moving from hardware dominated to software and services. So I'd done what a lot of people were doing, which was people were starting to leave IBM to go to those big software and services companies, and it was kind of like the next stage of growth, steady. You're never going to get fired from, or you'll always find an alternative from those kind of jobs. But I think it was the sort of corporate bit that sort of, it just turned out not to be me, really.
And what was it? Could you put a bit more colour on that?
I remember, like, my final day at IBM, this final Friday, and we were going to be going out for some lunch, and that day just happened to be the day a big tender had to be in from IBM to a client. And I worked all the way through the night. I hadn't gone to bed, and got the proposal finished and delivered it to the client. And then I was absolutely exhausted, went to my little leaving lunch. And I remember thinking my loyalty was with the client. And at that stage, IBM had done me proud, in the sense that given me a platform and the training and contacts and all that. But because I spent so much time out of the office, because I gravitated to clients, because I was selling some of the new propositions that the old guard in IBM were sort of skeptical of, I just kind of felt, do you know what? I'm a sort of fish out of water here, and I need to go somewhere else. Having set up a software company, I was absolutely clueless as to.
Well, you were a pioneer, because you sold the first colour ATM, Carl.
I was indeed. Well, I sold the first.
But
colour.
I always remember you as one of the most driven sellers. What you talk about, which is the customer had a requirement, there'd be a proposal on his desk or her desk the next morning. That was you, wasn't it? Whereas it would have taken 2 or 3 days for others. Yeah. You did it immediately.
I remember one night going for dinner with the CIO of what is now Zurich Assurance, and they told me that, just in passing, that they were changing who they did their disaster recovery service with. Now, IBM had literally just announced a disaster recovery proposition. So it wasn't there. They didn't know that. Anyway, I went back and I somehow put together a proposal for Zurich, literally overnight. And I went back in the morning and I met the guy that I'd been for dinner with in the car park, and I gave him the document. And I'm convinced to this day that the act of going back and putting it together, not the content, got them to take it seriously.
So do they buy?
They did buy in the end. They did. It took a couple of months because obviously we were coming from nowhere. But I think he thought there's something in this, whereas, it could have been just deemed you're too late or whatever.
And I've seen that side of you carry forward into how you like to drive startup and early stage businesses. You've always put a premium on pace, urgency, get it done. And I think that's carried, that's always been with you, isn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it has. And I think the big difference, one of the things in sort of preparing for today, the model's changed in the sense of when I look back at my two businesses over 20 years, we didn't have a single pound of debt ever. The whole adage of sell your way out of a problem, that was the only route. There just wasn't the get more funding, this whole kind of like, if things haven't gone well, we'll just turn to investors for that. Just never crossed our minds, really.
And I remember going to see you at AIT shortly after you joined, and you showed the product, and it had something called a GUI interface. Now, people of a younger ilk wouldn't know what a GUI interface was. That was a graphical user interface. But that was a breakthrough, wasn't it? Because it was a green on black screen up until that point. So this was innovative stuff. I mean, were you attracted to the breakthrough technology of AIT?
Yeah, I was. And my sort of obsession really was with, what this would do for others. So I remember many, many years afterwards, we were doing a proposal to John Charcoal, who at the time was the largest mortgage broker in the country. We were going to be doing all their point of sale financial planning systems. And we got to the final board meeting, and we'd got an agenda, and there was probably, 7 or 8 people from AIT there and 7 or 8 people from the client. We put the agenda up and it said demo Carl Rigby. Now, I'd previously met the CEO, who's now a very good friend, and he stopped the meeting and said, "Can I just check you are actually the CEO of this company?" I thought, yeah, I didn't quite understand where he's coming from. And he said, "Well, why are you doing the demo?" And I said, "Because I think I can demo the product better than anyone else." I probably couldn't, but the proposition and what it did for John Charcoal as a business was what that whole thing was about, and I needed to own and understand that. And so, yeah, I'm a bit of a rare beast in that sense.
I thought you were a bit unusual back then, actually, but you always put me to shame with your pace and strength. I didn't know that story about you demoing the product. Don't you think, reflecting back, we should use our 20s to work out what it is we want to do and where we play? I do think it's a sort of a decade of discovery, isn't it? After you leave school or uni. Obviously, I stayed in big corporate in IBM longer than you did, but you obviously worked it out, didn't you? And decided.
I think I stumbled across the right answer for me, and I'm a big believer that at the time that you are deciding what you want to do as a career is when you're least able or least knowledgeable about all of the options. So when I got to 29 and I eventually do my go from a very safe environment to a startup, I considered switching completely out of tech and going into some other industries. And what you realize is I started to look, and I couldn't command anything like the salary that I would got if I went to SEMA or PA. And so you quickly kind of sort of write it off. So in a sense, in the first couple of years of your 20s, I think you kind of determine your path. You don't see many people completely switching from one career to another. And that was certainly the case for me.
Well, let's just go back a little bit then. So what was your degree?
I did a business degree at Bath.
So back then, I mean, you're a bit younger than me, Carl, but IT was not as pervasive as it is now, so it was still a bit of a dark art. Not many people knew about it. Why did you end up going into IT? Was it a sort of milk round interview?
No, I did a placement. It was a thin sandwich course, so I did a placement, which I did at IBM in Portsmouth. And so when the milk round came around, I applied for some of the big tech companies. But you're right, it was a very different world. I think I had 10 first interviews lined up. I did 4. I got 4 offers and decided not to bother to go to the rest because I'd already got 4 to choose from. Now, you can't do that. That would be, if you said that to somebody graduating now, it's unheard of. But at the time, it was far easier to get jobs.
Yeah.
And IBM seemed to be the place that everybody wanted to go to.
As I said, it was the sun in the universe, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Did you see yourself as a seller or what we called salesman back then?
No. I joined in a technical role, and I think even when I started to sell, I was deeply involved in what the proposition was, and so.
You weren't winging it like a lot of us.
No, I tended not to go down that route. So I got deeply involved. I remember one particular proposition, which had only just come to fruition, and I somehow found out all about this. And I took the client over to the States, to Charlotte in North Carolina. And they thought, there was no references or anything like that. It was completely new. But we managed to get them to basically work out why this was the right route for them. And that was basically me and this guy who probably was the biggest oddball in IBM Bristol at the time, who was all over this proposition. And I think to most sellers in IBM, they just thought, what on earth is he doing? Because you don't do that sort of stuff. They were far more into the relationship. You do wine and dine and golf and all that. I never did any of that. But I would argue that I had a deeper, more trusting relationship because of some of the sort of oddball stuff that I did.
Well, it was a relationship built on competency and responsiveness, I suppose, were the 2 key words, weren't they? Yeah. I do think we can maybe enough for another day, but selling comes from many sources, doesn't it? Why do customers trust you? But competency and responsiveness.
Yeah, and because everybody was doing it differently, I spent that whole period thinking, am I doing the right thing here? It somehow felt like it was the right thing, but a lot of people were doing very different approaches. So I was questioning myself throughout the whole thing.
So let's fast forward again to AIT. Tell us a bit about that journey, because I remember at the time there weren't too many tech stocks on the main London Stock Exchange, and I was watching your progress and the company's progress, and it was pretty spectacular, wasn't it? And
so we grew year on year for 10 plus years, just basically sort of obsessed with growth. And
so this is from mid-90s through the dot-com bubble.
Early 90s. So from early 90s all the way through to post the dot-com, we kind of consistently grew. Steady growth, I would say, 25-30%. A large part of our revenue was services. So it wasn't as if, we could have spectacular growth through product. Yeah. We were constantly trying to change the percentage of product versus services, but I don't think we didn't really do a great job of that. But we certainly had very consistent growth. That all led to the flotation in 1997 when we entered the main market.
Internet was beginning to start accelerating then, wasn't it? We were sort of early days of the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
So then there was a little detour in your career, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Which expand on that.
Yeah.
And tell us what happened, because you actually fell foul of the Financial Conduct Authority. You were prosecuted, and you ended up being sent down for a period of time. And I think you did, what, 5 months as a guest of Her Majesty's prison service.
Yeah, I did. You when you look back now, the FSA or FCA, as it now is, they well, we actually did our first profits warning. That's what basically led to it all. So we were definitely trading on a premium because we were the blue-eyed boys of the city. We then do a profits warning, which what we'd actually done is it was immediately after 9/11. We never used to do an announcement that said we're in line with our forecast. We just waited to do our announcement. But 9/11, lots of tech companies had struggled, so the market was basically pushing everybody to say, we'd like to know whether you're in line or not. So we duly followed, and we put out a statement that said our numbers will be in line with market expectations.
And of course, to remind everybody listening, you were the CEO. You were the
I was
number
CEO and chairman at the time. So we put out the statement, and then within about it would be about a month of our year end, we had one particular big client project fall through. And so we subsequently, I think we put out our original statement on the 2nd of May. 28 days later, we put out a statement to say, actually, our numbers are now not going to be in line with market forecast. Because we were trading on a premium, that led to a massive drop in the share price.
How much?
I think 67% in a day. So just, a massive, massive drop. That leads to, or it did at the time, I have no idea what the regulation is now, but that leads to an automatic investigation if your share price falls by that amount. My focus at the time was obviously we were still growing, albeit not in line with market forecast. So I was just carrying on sort of growing the business.
So, but there must be huge pressure on keeping that whole beating expectations, every quarter, every half, every year, because it was a very thin market for tech business, wasn't it?
It was. I think we were fortunate here in the UK that it was half year and full. We didn't have the sort of every quarter piece. But it was massive, and the workload for somebody, chairman, CEO, on top of what you're normally doing, you can kind of, I don't know, it's at least a third again, keeping all the investors up to date. And so when something goes wrong, which it did, then obviously that workload just soars, and it's very difficult to keep your eye on the business and continue growing the business, which is what investors really want you to do. But obviously they want you to talk, and it's also the technology was very different in the sense that it wasn't a case of can everybody jump on a Zoom call. You had to physically go to all these people and sort of say, let me take you through. So you'd have an hour and a half, and we obviously had a hell of a lot of investors, mostly in London, some in Edinburgh, and you literally had to work a lot.
So you were the darling of the London Stock Exchange. You announced basically a profits warning.
Yeah.
Share price basically dropped 67% or something like that. It triggered an FCA FSA investigation. Take the story forward from there then.
So that took the whole kind of investigation and then finding out that I was being charged for misleading the market. That took a couple of years.
Well, just put a little bit more colour on that. You were charged with misleading the market. What did they say you did?
So effectively, when we announced on the 2nd of May 2002 that our forecasts were in line with our performance would be in line with market expectations. When we then corrected that, if you like, on the 28th of May, 28 days later, they basically said that that first announcement, we would have known that our numbers were not in line with market, so that we misled the market, albeit for a period of 28 days, but nevertheless misled the market.
So you basically announced a set of numbers on the 2nd of May, revised them down, I assume, on the 28th of May. Right. And why were they revised down?
We had our model was we'd have big contracts where we would do a sort of a pilot, if you like, or a proof of concept. But these were not like small, quick little turn it round. These were like 6-month projects. So we'd got a particular project where we'd done a study for, I think the cost was like 250K. And that would lead on to the project. The project was 5-6 million. So we'd done that study. And basically when, because we were under pressure because of 9/11, other things had fallen through. So we did need these deals to happen. Yeah. That project was obviously going ahead, and what we should have done was just basically let that take its natural flow through the accounts on the basis that, you know, if someone spends 250K, they're going ahead, and book it accordingly. What we asked for, or what I asked for, and probably the mistake that I made was we asked them to sign a contract, and we gave them a side letter to say, if for whatever reason downstream that you decide not to go ahead, then you can effectively pull out, which basically puts some conditionality.
Yeah.
I thought what I was doing was basically asking them to sign a contract, to review the whole thing and sign it quicker than they would have normally done. That was sort of extra security on top of spending 250K. But legally, it meant that they could back out of the contract, which means there's conditionality on the contract, which means that you shouldn't put those in your numbers. Now, the reason I mentioned that particular client is because they were affected badly by 9/11, and they decided to pull on the contract, which was why we then said our numbers are not going to be in line with market expectations.
Got it. That's nice and clear. But when this was 2002?
2002.
Well, I was in the industry at the time, and things have been tightened up considerably since then. But our industry was rife with side letters back in those days. So I guess that it was happening all the time.
I think it was, and I remember in IBM days, the 39th of December, and people with side letters in a drawer that don't get shown to whoever. But I think we were a public company, and the rules were clear. And whilst I might have thought that I was doing the right thing, I'm not the judge in this particular case. So I remember at the time someone getting in touch with me and saying, "We've just done a project for a bank in Poland. We've done the whole services and the whole license, and we basically said to them, if you don't like when it's finally implemented and you want to not go live with it, we'll back out the whole thing. And we booked all of that revenue. So you're right, things were going down a certain route in terms of people did date these practices, but unfortunately, I was in a position where I was chief exec and chairman of a company which was listed, and the rules are the rules.
And what were you sent down for then? What was the crime? Was it misleading investors?
So it was basically misleading the market and effectively saying, because you had got a side letter in place and you had that conditionality, even though you might have corrected your announcement on 28 days later, you misled the market for 28 days. Now, obviously, during those 28 days, I didn't do anything like sell any shares or anything like that. Otherwise, I really would have been in hot water. But nevertheless, we were deemed, or I was deemed, to have misled the market for 28 days in the sense that our share price was inflated, even though we did nothing with it. It nevertheless.
Who were your accountants? Who were your auditors?
Arthur Anderson at the time, and so there was lots of people involved in this process, and lots of people probably learning as they went along. So we shared with them what we were doing, and everybody got comfortable with the. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think everybody would say, "No, well, I wouldn't have done that." And
so, when you were charged with this, were you shocked?
Well, I was very shocked because so we got the FSA investigation, which you get an FSA investigation at the time if your share price falls by a certain amount. So I cracked on with growing the business. I wasn't really involved. Well, I wasn't involved with the when they came in to do their investigation. I remember, but obviously you need to get legal representation. So I had legal representation, even though I didn't really think anything was going to come of it. I remember I was sat in the car park of Waitrose, and I saw 3 missed calls from my solicitor. It was about 6 o'clock one evening, and I thought, that doesn't feel right. And I was on a call to someone else, dropped that call, and then I was told I was being prosecuted. My immediate response was, for what? I didn't really understand. But I do, I've got to, stand in front of the mirror and look at myself, and I do understand now. But at the time, I was.
Yes, there wasn't a sense of, I've done something wrong, I hope I get away with it. You didn't think you did anything wrong, so there was nothing to get away with. So
the key thing was in getting a side letter because they were signing a contract to sort of protect it, to almost to solidify. I thought it was solidifying. It clearly was giving some conditionality to the client. So I was trying to speed up the process. They were committed to the project. In fact, the client gave evidence to say, when we made that announcement on the 2nd of May, were you going ahead with the project? Absolutely. The guy said, I don't spend 250k of the company's money and not go ahead. Did it have board approval? Yes, it did. All of those things. But if he's then shown the side letter, and then says, what is that? It is what it is.
No, I'm not. I mean, you've admitted you did something wrong as far as the law of the land was concerned, but there'll be a lot of people listening who were in senior positions in the IT industry back then who probably think, crikey, that could have been me.
Yeah, and there's lots of people that got in touch and said, I'm grateful, it wasn't me, but the thing I'm a very positive, you look forward, not back kind of person. As a result of what happened, I lost my position at AIT, and I went on to set up another software company with a close friend and someone we'd worked with at AIT, and I wouldn't have done that if I'd not have been investigated and prosecuted and ousted. So I set up this other software company, and I set that up prior to the trial. So we set that up in 2003, and started to build that. That was it was a mortgage point of sale and financial planning was the product, which we sold to banks and whatnot. And we set that up. Obviously, at the time, I'm preparing for a trial and all the challenges that brings.
So tell us a bit about what happened next in terms of the sentence and what happened in prison.
Yeah. So I was basically sentenced on October the 7th, 2005. And I ended up the same day in Brixton Prison, which, as you quite rightly said, it's not the most welcoming of environments. Within 2 days of being there, because you basically go to a holding prison before you get sent to a prison which is appropriate to your sentence, in my case, an open prison. Maybe this says something about me as well, but I asked for a job whilst I 2 days in, because 23 hours a day locked up just wasn't doing it. So I asked for a job, got a job on what they call reception. When people think of reception, they think of welcoming, sort of friendly, helpful. It was none of those things. It was basically the job was when the prisoners came back from court, or in most cases they're prisoners on remand, you basically served them some food. And in the meantime, when they weren't coming in, you cleaned all the holding cells before they then go on to their wing. So I did that. I ended up staying at Brixton for way longer than I should have. I should have been there about a week, but I ended up staying about 10 weeks, I think, because I was doing some useful work. So when I kept asking, as my categorization come through and can I move on, they were saying, it hasn't come through. And I'm convinced to this day that was the reason.
So who were you sharing a cell with?
Well, various people, because they move people on. So I probably shared with, I don't know, 5 or 6 people. But bear in mind, there's a big ethnic mix in Brixton. Not a lot of people in prison, it may seem of a surprise to people, were of the age that I was. An awful lot of young people, different ethnic mixes. So you stand out like a sore thumb, really. But you just kind of crack on.
So were your fellow sort of cellmates, were they down for serious crimes?
Yeah, down for murder, GBH, all sorts of different...
So here's you, CEO 1 minute, committed a crime in terms of misleading markets, that as a consequence of that, you end up in a fairly high security prison sharing a cell with murderers.
Yeah, and
convicted murderers.
And they've got, when they say, what are you in for? It's impossible to explain to them what it is, because as I've explained to you, it's quite technical reason. They don't see that as it's not a proper crime to them, even though it is a crime.
So they sort of say, what did you really do?
Yeah. So, where have you stashed all the money or something like that? So they just didn't understand it. But I look back now and I think I learned an awful lot. I learned an awful lot about life, about people's challenges, people from, I'm from a very working class background, but people not just from environments like that, people from environments where there's problems, troubles, on a daily basis. So, I didn't go there to learn that. I went there to get out as quick as I could. But nevertheless, I picked up on an awful lot of life experience, I suppose.
Yeah, that's amazing, to be honest, because it's something that's so far removed from most people listening.
Yeah.
And, maybe this isn't the right expression, but there could be a bit of, well, that could have been me. I mean, people might say, well, it wouldn't have been me because I wouldn't have done what Carl did.
Yeah.
But you didn't, this was in the Catholic sort of lexicon of sins, where you've got mortal sin, cardinal sin, venial sin. This was almost a sort of venial sin. I'm not condoning it, but you were sharing a cell with people that had conducted.
Yeah, and I'm not sort of doing anything other than saying I understood why I was there, why I was convicted, and even though later down the line I appeal various parts of it successfully, it's kind of irrelevant, really. I've made a big thing, when people say, if you Google something, it will come up. And so some people will say, why don't there's a process where you can stop that coming up. I refuse to do that because I don't think it will, people know. I don't think it changed anything. B, all my friends were absolutely fantastic. In fact, all my clients were absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I sold to several of my clients when I was at N4 post all of this. So I just kind of think it's there. That's what it is.
There was one story that you shared with me a while back that you might not want to talk about, which was you were serving in the kitchen, and it basically brought home to me how tough a regime it was, that your life was almost at risk at times in the prison. You happy to talk about that?
Yeah. I was serving in the kitchen with one other inmate, and basically when all the prison vans came back, we'd have gone to the kitchen, got the right number of meals, and there would be, halal, vegetarian, other different options, but you got the right number of meals. If there was 50 people coming back in, there were 50 meals, but it would just kick off every night. It was people would come back, and I always remember this one guy. He'd say, when he said, what do you want? He'd say, I'll have a little bit of that, I'll have a little bit of that. And every night, the guy I was working with would say, no, it don't work like that. You've got to choose one. And he would say, well, it's not your food, and the whole thing was just like, these people with short fuses, they could have been convicted that day, had a bad day in court, whatever. So someone says, and then if they're on the last bus coming back and there isn't their choice, then that didn't exactly go down well either. So the whole thing would kick off. And this one particular day, the guy that was working with me, he got the same amount of grief. And I think I'd had a bad call or something. I wasn't myself. And so I would never do something like this. But I basically sort of took over and said, he tells you every day, what the process is. Now either choose or whatever. And I put the shutter down, thinking, right, that's got rid of him. I remember sort of turning round to this other guy and giggling. I wasn't giggling for long because there was a door in the sideways. This guy came in and started to strangle me over the kitchen, and we managed to get him off. But the giggle and me thinking I'd been clever was pretty short-lived. But you learn.
And you become best of friends. No, I'm only joking.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what a story, Carl. And I think the way you took that as a, all right, I did something wrong. I've got to serve my time, and in many respects, the humility and the wisdom that you've got from that is I think very impressive, and reflects really well on you as a person.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's I really like this guy because he's whenever somebody starts the woe is me story, I never do that, right? And he always says, I've got the best woe is me story ever. So if somebody starts, he said I never talk about this, but I just trump them. And he was a Barnardo's child, and he said every month in those days, it wasn't like all the process you have to go through now and whatnot. It was like you will the kids out. And he said, I used to go there, sort of, put my best smile on and try and go to the front of the queue to see if I could get picked. And I was 3.5 before I first got picked. And so you think of this little kid going there. So he said, whenever anybody does the woe is me, he said, I just trump them with that.
So, you were inside for how long?
4.5 months. My partner, business partner at N4, he managed to keep the whole thing ticking along, and then I literally came out and re-engaged with N4.
So just to remind listeners, during the 2 years charged but awaiting trial, is that I got that right?
Yeah.
You basically left AIT, and started up another business called N4 with a business colleague, which carried on whilst during the 4.5 months holiday, and then you went back and reconnected.
Yeah, carried on during the 4.5 months, but also there was a hell of a lot of preparation for the trial. So there was a couple of years where it was really difficult, really long hours, long days. And then I basically came back out and got stuck back into the business, literally from day one. And we then, carried on growing that business, and that basically culminated in 2007 when we we effectively sold the business to Experian.
For how much?
We sold it for 27 million plus a 12 million earnout.
So obviously financially you did quite nicely out of that transaction.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting how life's journey, where it takes you. I mean, in a funny sort of way, if you hadn't have been prosecuted, you probably would have stayed at AIT.
Oh, I would.
And you'd never have set up N4.
No, I'd probably been there today, to be honest. It was my baby. So, I got ousted from my baby, but you've just got to get up, dust yourself down and crack on. And, N4 turned out to be financially for me a bigger success than AIT. So
it's interesting, isn't it? How these things work out. Now, you said 2007, and if my history is correct, didn't Lehman Brothers go under in something like September 07, or was that Northern Rock? But so
well, that turned out to be we sold to Experian in July of 2007, and bear in mind, 75% of our revenue came from the mortgage point of sale, and the rest from financial services. Experian had a process where they did all their due diligence, and then effectively have a board meeting to sort of it's just routine to sign it off. During the board meeting, we were told afterwards that the guy from Experian US, our contact said it nearly didn't go ahead. Why is that? And he said, well, it's the first one I've ever seen where somebody says, I'm not sure about this one. The guy from the US said he'd got an issue with this because of the credit crunch, to which we said, credit crunch, what's that? Now, obviously, a month later, the whole world knew about the credit crunch. But basically, if we'd have gone a month later, absolutely would never have sold. Now, to be to be fair, we achieved all our numbers in earnout and whatnot, so our growth was fine. So as an investment from experience point of view, it was great. But they simply wouldn't have done it if it had been a month later.
So they're the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. They're summed up in a short period of time between AIT getting sent down, coming out, and making a decent sum of money, just in the nick of time before before the crash.
Exactly.
And then you did your earnout and left.
Yeah.
When you left, what did you think the next chapter in your life was going to be?
It was the first time, which I didn't know really. So I thought I'm going to take sort of 6 months off, or I'm not going to really do much. And so I started to do that. And I thought I'd buy a bit of property. And then I started to think, well, I could do some sort of investments. I wasn't one of these that had done investments as I'd gone along as on the side. I'd no experience of investments at all. So I bought a few properties for rental. And then I basically thought maybe I'd got a little bit bored. But I thought what I'm going to do, I'm going to work out a certain amount of money that I'm happy to invest, such that if the whole thing goes belly up, I'm still okay, and let's see how we go with that. So that's where my investment, or if you like, angel investment piece started.
I think that's when you persuaded me to invest in one of those early stage companies. I remember we met at the Goring Hotel in London.
Yeah.
I'd already made one investment into a soup company. Not particularly high tech, and you came along and told me about a particular company. We probably shouldn't mention their name, but it was a special coatings company, on non-reflective coatings on glass. And I remember you persuaded me to part with some money. So was that early on in your journey?
That was. I think it was either the first or the second. I did 2 investments.
It still hasn't paid out yet, by the way.
It still hasn't paid out. No, what I've done over the years, I was sort of trying to work out what I like about what I did and what I don't like about it. So I think if I was doing it all again now, I'd go about it in a very different way. So I've played a game a few times where I've described a few propositions to people and said, which ones do you think would fly? And I think the thing I've learned now, I think I've got 3 things that I want to say I've learned. The first is invest in people and not in product and proposition. If I look back,
invest in the leadership team.
Invest in the leadership team. Check those out, suss their backgrounds, all of that, because I've invested in some great propositions that were way ahead of their time, that collapsed. I invested in a business virtual gym, online, download classes. Everybody thinks now, well, that should have, it was way ahead of its time. The technology backing it up was great, but it just didn't exist. It was a CEO issue, not a proposition issue. Equally, I could think of a couple of businesses where I've invested in, where less glamorous in terms of propositions, very little in terms of USPs versus competition, but run really well by people at the top. Real grafters, humble people, and they've gradually made it happen. So I definitely if I look back now, I'd invest in people and not propositions. And for quite a while, I did the latter and not the former. That would be my first lesson. The second lesson I would say is, which is one I think a lot of people would expect, is everything takes about 3 times as long. Now, that's not just the headline, the number of business plans you'll have seen, which says in 3 to 4 years we're going to exit at whatever, and it takes 3 to 4 times as long as that. But just 3 to 4 times longer to build the product, 3 to 4 times longer to get money from investors, 3 to 4 times longer to get the first sale. The whole thing just gets, and it comes back to something you reminded me of earlier, which is pace. I think if you get the right leaders involved, is pace is just inherent in who they are and what they do. I think with some where they've got the right proposition, it's kind of like we've worked out the proposition, they will come to us, and as you know, it never happens. So that would be the second lesson I'd invest knowing that. And I've been badly burnt in a couple of cases with that. And then the third thing I would say is when I got, say, 5 or 6 investments, I seemed to think at the time, right, these need propping up. I'm going to put my time and effort. I won't bother with the ones succeeding. They're naturally going in the right direction. I'll put my time and effort into propping up the ones that aren't going as well. And I think that was a big mistake. I think I should have gone full steam ahead and in helping the ones that were working grow faster. I think that would have been financially more beneficial for me, but B, it would have been, and I know I'm preaching to the converted here, it would have been a million times less frustrating.
Yeah.
Because working with people that think they know what they're doing, think they've got it all covered, don't listen, don't take advice. Really, they might say they'll do all that during the process of getting your money, but then once they've got your money, they'll do their own thing. And I've wasted way too much time trying to prop up, unsuccessfully in most cases, prop up the ones that are losing as opposed to getting fully behind the ones that
I'd agree with
win.
all three of those. I mean, let's just go back to the leadership thing, because I
Yeah.
completely agree with you on that. So what do you look for in leadership of a early stage business then? What are the characteristics
Yeah.
that you look for?
So I think now I'd look for some really basic things. So I'd try and suss out how hard somebody worked. So I'm sure, check through, their history, this, that, and the other. How much of a sort of grafter they were. I think I would try and suss out what they were like with people in terms of motivating, recruiting, how they got people in the first place and engaged them and stuff like that. I try and suss out what they were like with clients, and did they have a balanced view of the client relationship. You meet too many people that say, these idiots don't know what they're, we know better. Well, you clearly don't, So it would be a few basic things where I think you could say, do you know what? I think that person is pretty solid. Now, you obviously look at proposition, but I can think of one particular business where there is no USPs, and this business has grown steadily over 15 years. It's just a well-run, driven.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Everyone looks for uniqueness, and if the market's big enough, you don't need to be unique. You just need to be really good at what
exactly.
you do, because there's a big enough market for you. I think one of the things that I would add to that is what I'd call financial. How much personal financial runway have you got?
Yeah.
Because it's quite attractive setting up a startup business, because people look at the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah.
But quite often people do it when they can't, when they're least able to do it, because they've got financial commitments elsewhere with family, etc.
Yeah.
They haven't got enough money behind them, particularly in certain businesses like SaaS businesses, where you need a fair bit of investment over a period of time. And or they're doing it part-time because they can't afford to give up the day job. So would you agree that actually you got to look at the financial circumstances? So when I invest, I ask some pretty intrusive questions about financial circumstances, which some people think, well, why are you asking that? No, I want to know whether you can stick at this for a year, say, without actually earning much money.
Yeah, and whether in some ways there's if you haven't got other financial options, I know it shouldn't be like this, but you kind of think, well, you've no route out of this other than to make the business work. So there's a sort of nicety in that. Also,
So it works both ways as well.
it works both ways. I hate situations where people just think it's not quite gone as fast as it could. Usually somebody else's fault rather than their own, and they think we'll just go to the market to ask for some more money. I just, that for me is just, really poor leadership, and also they didn't really share that journey as they've gone because they didn't feel it themselves. They didn't feel that when they did the raise, they thought we're going to get some other business in, so this will last us 12 months, and it's not. It's lasted 6. It's lasted 6, and they're asking again, and they just didn't know the journey they were going on, and they should have, and it's very difficult if they're not humble people.
Humility. It's not always there, because I think you said a minute or so ago, founders tend to think they found the cure for world hunger, don't they? With whatever their product or service is, it's fantastic, it's unique. The whole world will beat a path to my door. No, that's not the way it works. There's huge amount of noise out there.
Yeah.
You're a very small company. How do you actually get to the market? How do you get to your customer? And my sense is, once the cash is raised, the thing that they desperately need, and quite often aren't qualified to do it, is win business, particularly if they're selling to enterprises, because you and I grew up in the world of enterprise selling. It's different than B2C. Yeah. It's different than selling, for example, to small businesses. It's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It takes a long time.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is they think it's all about their product, and the client should look at this shiny new product, which is better than anything else on the market, and that's it. Why would they go anywhere else? But there's, as you know, there's so many other reasons why people buy. They trust you. You're financially secure. You've got a reference client. All these reasons. So it's not the shiny new product. They're looking at all of these things, and I could think of examples that we've worked on where actually it's taken 2 years for someone to realize actually the buying process, the buying criteria are broader, but they've had to lose a few things along the way, and they've had to go to the client and say, why didn't you come to us? Now, they'd start that journey thinking, well, that's ridiculous. We've got money. Well, it doesn't matter. If they think you're not stable for a long enough period, then that's a fail. And that's a fail on you selling. It's not a failure on them in any way, shape, or form.
That's why we got really excited and enjoyed B2B selling into enterprises, because it's a Rubik's Cube, it's a game of chess, it's all of those things, and it has to be thought
and when
through.
It comes back to when you check these people out beforehand, you're kind of checking them out for what you know is the journey they need to go on, right? Can they recruit people? Can they motivate people? Can they sell? All of those things. And you're not, you'll take a look at the product and its USP or whatever, but that's only a certain part of it. And what you don't want to do is, and I think we've been on this a couple of times, is you're going on a journey of them understanding. You thought they did understand it, right? I thought they did understand it, but they're clearly demonstrating they don't, and it just takes them longer.
Well, I suppose building on that, the other thing, I think this is important in life, but it is important for those early stage businesses, is keeping an open mind as to where the value is for your product and service. Because you start off thinking, well, the bullseye on the dartboard is there. But actually, after a bit of market testing and a bit of experience, you find it's not quite at point X, it's at point Y.
Yeah.
And being able to adapt the offer and the market you're selling to through experience. And so having that ability to basically think, not shut your mind off as to what problem you're trying to fix or opportunity you're trying to address.
One of my first investments, which didn't work, I lost a lot of money on, was a business virtual gym. Now, it was clearly a B2C play, and that was where the focus of the leadership team were. But what became obvious early on was that corporates were interested in buying this for their staff. It was kind of a cheap way of saying, yeah, we'll give you gym membership. And also because you could do this service at home, if you can't get to the gym or you're intimidated with the gym and stuff like that. So they would pay, instead of sort of like $9.99 a month, they'd pay like 99p per employee. And there was a corporate, the management team at the time, this was a kind of, we're a B2C, we're going to take over the world, we're going to, all that sort of stuff. But the B2B bit was what was keeping the bank manager at bay. And we should have pushed that for longer. I even found out at one point that meetings that had been arranged to go and see businesses, they wouldn't show up at. They literally wouldn't show up at. So
that's an example, isn't it, of a closed mind?
Yeah, it's a totally closed mind. And also, it's also an example of where, as an investor, you talk to the management team and you get some sort of agreement as to what you're going to do. And in some cases, they then just go off and do what they really want. They just want to get you out of the way. And so that business would have, gone on for longer, got some cash in to gradually grow. I knew it was a B2C play. It was only ever going to be a big success if we got that right. But we just didn't have enough time.
You and I know what my most enjoyable investment was in terms of fun, but it was also one of spectacular failure. I wonder if it's the same
I know what
one.
You're going to say.
I know whether it's the same one that you're thinking of. It wasn't a tech business.
No.
It was a beer business. Is that would you say the same?
Yeah, I'd say the same. And I think we used an expression in the last few days of waves of investors, where the CEO in question, there was an example of him not listening. I think you said to him many, many times, it's all about sort of establishing it within small retail, getting some
small
traction.
Communities, bottoms up.
Where, exactly. And he was going for the big retailers. We're going to get it listed in all these different places, and it's going to be an overnight success. He didn't listen to that. But what he was good at was he was good at raising money, and then working with those wave one of those investors. And then when wave one of those investors got pissed off because he wasn't doing what clearly was the right things to do, he'd go and find wave two. And then wave two became his best mates. And then he eventually pissed them off, and then he'd get wave three. And I think we were wave two on that one. But unfortunately, the business finally went under when wave four got.
But it's not just where you end up in life. The journey has to be fun as well, and I think we had a exciting journey, didn't we?
We did.
But I tell you what it did with me. It put me off B2C. Really, it put me off as an investor into the consumer packaged good, that consumer B2C market. I felt it was. SaaS is a big, deep pocket business, but building a brand is seriously deep pocket.
And I'd be the first to say I don't know that space at all. I might have some opinions like the next person, but I just don't know it. And so we did that, and it was a bit of fun, and we all got a crate of Bondi beer, which were a great.
And it was a great beer. It was a great
lovely
taste.
Beer.
And anyway, right. So we're sort of coming to the end of the podcast. I guess you're sort of thinking, well, where are you? Are you thinking beyond business career? I shouldn't make that assumption.
I'm where I am now is, and I do find a lot of people will stretch their business. They want it to sort of go on. They can't let go, sort of thing.
Do you put me in that category?
I do put you that in a little bit. I do put you in a little bit.
I thought you had me in mind.
But I think you're not as bad as some. But you do enjoy it, right? And I enjoy it, but I definitely I've got 4 investments left, 2 of which I work with, 2 of which I'm such a tiny investor, probably wouldn't even know who I was. But once those 2 that I work with have gone, the only other time I would invest is if it's genuinely just a little bit of money and I and I'm not involved
Yeah.
because it goes back to some of the things we're saying. My problem is getting involved at a deep level and gaining the confidence of those people, so I just get sucked in. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do is I'm doing more and more travel. So the last few years I've been here, there, and everywhere. And I plan to do a lot more, long haul travel. A hell of a lot of exercise, fitness. When I sort of said I wanted
Cycling?
when I said I wanted to get out of all of this, it was about 3 years ago, and I did the North Coast 500 with my daughter. I've cycled pretty much all across Europe. I've committed to do the London Marathon next year with my daughter. And
Believe it or not, I did that many years ago.
I know you did. I know you did. So I'm going to do that. So I'll do a lot more fitness, usual sort of family stuff. We've got a fantastic set of mates that we do. And one thing that takes up a fair bit of time is following Liverpool. Going. I don't exactly live close to Liverpool, so with 2 season tickets, that's a day going up and coming back from games.
And you're a proper Liverpool fan, aren't you? Because you go up and down the M5, M6
yeah.
to get to Liverpool. You followed them around Europe and lots of memorable.
Loads of away games. We get access to away tickets, so all the London games are easier for me to get to than going up to Anfield.
Yeah,
so.
I'd say, knowing you as I do, I was amazed that you were walking away from business, but then I think if somebody goes deep into what they're doing, and would I be right in saying that if you can't run a business, being a sort of in a non-executive type sort of advisory role doesn't do it for you?
It doesn't.
And therefore, what you throw yourself into, so I look, there's a slightly obsessive side of you, which isn't there? Because with cycling, you started almost replicating the Tour de France and getting into it really seriously. And I think you're doing the same with golf, which is you'll probably be playing off scratch before long. Because when you throw yourself at something, you go deep. Whereas I'm much more of a, I made that executive to non-executive world relatively easy. I don't think it's as fulfilling, but, I'm probably... I'm more of a generalist than you are. You become very specialist.
I agree with that. And so I can think of a business that we're both involved in at the moment. And you are doing all the right things in terms of working with the two main exec. I think I tend to have got involved at a lower level in what specific things need to happen to get the sales funnel going, and I partly because I think you're covering the upper stuff, I can cover the lower stuff, and I quite enjoy that, but partly because I get involved in the detail. I'm not very good at this sort of here's an investment and just once a month just having a bit of a chat and a catch up and whatnot. I don't do that well, really.
So, Carl, we come to the end of our time. Thank you very much. Thanks for your openness and honesty. Not easy talking about some of the things we've talked about, but what an interesting career, and what a career of great success, and lots of learnings for the people listening and watching out there. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Please make sure you're following on whichever platform you're using, and leave us a review so we can learn and improve this particular podcast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, Martin.